All right, welcome everyone to our presentation. We are so excited to be presenting today on something that we really care about. So we're just gonna go ahead and get started. Sorry, we are a little bit late. Alina, Samantha was 12. Haley was 9. Each in a different area of the world, each with a different story, but all with one thing in common. Each girl was a victim and is now a survivor of human trafficking. These girls aren't unique in their experiences, however. Millions of people around the world today share this story. It's our job to hear their cries for help. Good afternoon. My name is Esther Stoddard, and I, along with my colleagues at the Wasatch Independent Debate League Civic Advocacy Group, are proud to present today at the UN Commission on the Status of Women. The Wasatch Independent Debate League Civic Advocacy Group is a Utah-based, youth-led nonprofit. Our youth learn about the workings of governments while creating real change through civic engagement activities. We're passionate about maintaining the values that the UN seeks to uphold. With this as our focus, we're presenting this afternoon on human trafficking. Alliance 8.7 is a subsidiary of the UN that is, quote, an inclusive global partnership committed to achieving Target 8.7 of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. They estimate that there are currently 40 million victims of modern slavery or human trafficking in the world. Let's break that down a little bit. According to the Global Slavery Index, an organization dedicating to eradicating modern slavery, Africa has the highest prevalence of human trafficking, with 7.6 people in every 1,000 being affected. Africa is followed by Asia and the Pacific, with 6.1 victims per 1,000, Europe and Central Asia at 3.9 per 1,000, and the Arab states and Americas with a lower percentage of 3.3 and 1.9 per 1,000 respectively. It's obvious then that human trafficking doesn't just affect a few countries, it is a worldwide issue. The heartbreaking reality is that according to World's Children, a nonprofit focused on creating a better world for children, 27% of victims are under the age of 18. Not only this, but human trafficking disproportionately affects women. 71% or 28 million victims are women, according to Alliance 8.7. This is why when discussing issues that affect women, we have to talk about human trafficking. The effects of human trafficking are only growing in size. According to the US Department of Homeland Security, human trafficking is the world's fastest growing criminal enterprise. Worth more than nearly any other criminal enterprise in the world, Human Rights First, a nonprofit centered around the protection of human rights, estimates that human trafficking generates roughly $150 billion per year. To put that in perspective, that's about 60% more than Facebook makes in a year. In our presentation today, we hope to shed light on a topic that can so easily stay in the dark. First, we'll discuss the causes of human trafficking, sexual exploitation, and cheap labor. Next, we'll talk about the effects, being exploitation and a decrease in freedom. And lastly, we'll discuss what each of us can do to cause change. With that, I'll let my colleague Lily Archibald talk more about the effects of human trafficking. Thank you.
Thank you. As Esther was saying, sex trafficking is a growing enterprise around the world. The ILO reported in 2016 that of the estimated 25 million persons in forced labor, 5 million were victims of sexual exploitation. This issue is especially prevalent for young girls. In 2020, 50% of human trafficking victims identified in US federal cases were young girls, children under the age of 18. Most girls are tricked or coerced into trafficking before they are 14 to 15 years old. Not only are there more people being trafficked around the world now, but the profit is also going up. Global commercial profits for sexual slavery are estimated to be 99 billion, according to ILO 4. Sex trafficking is happening everywhere around the world. When many people hear about sex trafficking, they think of something from the past. This is simply not true. There are 3 common misconceptions when it comes to sexual exploitation. The first is people don't think sex trafficking is happening around them. Sex trafficking can and does happen all around us. Sexual exploitation can happen to anyone, and that's something we need to realize. We also need to understand that these pimps are hidden in plain sight. Whether it's a massage parlor or a seedy motel, these brothels are right there. You never have to look far to find them. The second misconception that many people have is that sex trafficking is only physical abuse. Many victims of sexual abuse cannot get out of their situations because of the emotional abuse their traffickers are inflicting on them. They will tell them that they are not loved and that no one will love them now and that they are dirty and cannot be saved. These are all lies. The last misconception that many people have is that sex trafficking is black and white. In reality, sex trafficking has many layers to it. No victim's story is the same. And when we try and put sex trafficking in a box and expect every story to be the same, we alienate victims who feel like their voices aren't being heard and that they did something wrong. Let's try and understand all the different perspectives so we can help every victim in whatever circumstance they were in. To demonstrate the differences in sex trafficking from what we think it looks like, I would like to tell you a story. This story is from Liz Williamson. When Liz was just 6 years old, her mother started selling her for child pornography. From the age of 6 to 18, she was raped nearly every night. Men would pay to have sex with her, and her mother would tell her, "Smile, look pretty, and do whatever he says if you love me." Liz Williamson said, quote, "Being raped got so ordinary, I forgot it was wrong. The first time somebody didn't listen to my no, didn't get off me, why would I fight after that?" As a child, she tried to escape, but well-meaning hotel employees would tell her to go back to her family, or she would simply be locked in her room. When she started college, she got out of the industry for a little bit, but then she met a man who started pimping her out again. She began to be trafficked again until she was 23. During this time, she contacted a woman named Jenny Williamson. They stayed in contact for a while, and then after 6 months, she was adopted into the family. Liz was finally out of sex trafficking for good. Now she, along with her adopted mother, fight against human trafficking, raising awareness and working with organizations to end exploitation. The last thing I would like to address before we move on and talk about cheap labor is what we can do. The biggest thing we can do to stop exploitation is to recognize the signs, because this exploitation is happening right under our very noses. There are several different signs of human trafficking, which will be discussed later on by Caroline. But before we can get to that, Devin will discuss another important part of human trafficking, cheap labor.
Wow, these young women are incredible. And men.
As mentioned earlier, there is a massive number of people who are in the grips of modern slavery. A large portion of these people are exploited for cheap labor. According to the International Labor Organization, that number is 21 million. 21 million people are forced into labor every single year. To understand this issue better, it's important to know where this is happening. Out of those 21 million people, 1.5 million people are located in North America, 1.8 million people in South America, 3.7 million in Africa, 13.3 million in Asia. Out of those, 75% are women. Those who go through human trafficking for forced labor are subjected to inhumane hours, improper sanitary and safety conditions, and cruel treatment. Vinook Purim a victim of human trafficking from Cambodia, recounted his story. He was supporting his wife, who was pregnant, and was in search of a job that could cover expected medical bills. One day, a man on a motorbike taxi approached him and informed him that the only available jobs were across the border in Thailand. Mr. Prum was suspicious and even initially refused the offer, but due to lack of other work, he ultimately changed his mind and traveled with the man to Mali. His destination was a small, windowless cement room that remained locked from the outside. After arriving in the room, Mr. Prum, through a hole in the wall, noticed the ocean and several fishing boats. He realized he had been sold to work on a boat. Mr. Prum spent 3 years trapped on that fishing boat, far out at sea. During this time, himself and other workers endured dangerous and exhausting work for up to 20 hours a day. In addition to those working conditions, they were subjected to beatings and torture from the traffickers. Fortunately, Mr. Prum was able to eventually escape during an infrequent landing and got to the authorities. Stories like Vinook Prum and others beg the question, what is the cause? The answer goes back to the basic principles of supply and demand. Forced laborers like Mr. Prum cost manufacturers far less than legitimate employees. Traffickers don't have to compensate their victims for the work. They don't have to provide a safe work environment or any other amenities. All of this culminates to reduce costs for the manufacturer, which leads to increased profits. Just how much profit comes through forced labor? That number is estimated to be above $150 billion. Broken down by region, the two main areas that profit are Asia at $51 billion and North America at $46 billion. This represents the incentive to exploit people's labor, but that's only half the story. The other key result is that cheap labor is the reduction of the ultimate cost of the product. Some of those savings on the part of the manufacturer are then passed on to the consumer, resulting in cheaper prices for consumers. In our modern world, we expect to have a wide variety of goods at rock bottom prices available to them. According to the US Department of Labor, the most common materials and goods produced through forced labor are sugarcane, cotton, coffee, tobacco, cattle, rice, fish, bricks, garments, textiles, footwear, carpets, fireworks, gold, coal, and diamonds. Goods aren't the only amenity that demands forced labor, however. Cheap domestic services are also in high demand. United Way reported with Sabine's experience with domestic servitude. Sabine was the only member of her family to survive the Rwandan genocide. So she agreed when a wealthy family offered for her a chance to move with America to them. Shortly after her arrival, however, she was imprisoned in their home, forced to work around the clock, and made to sleep on the kitchen floor. Thankfully, and unlike many others, Sabine was able to escape her situation. However, this speaks to another aspect of demand for cheap labor. Another aspect is governmental. I wish I could tell you that what I recounted earlier was the end of Vinook Prum's story. However, once he reached the Thai authorities and pleaded for passage back to Cambodia, the officers picked up the phone, placed a call, and had a car arrive to pick him up. The drivers and the officials exchanged money. Mr. Prum was then sold to work on a palm oil plantation, where he'd be kept for another 4 months. Institutional slavery and corruption is another large factor that drives the forced labor market. Uyghur Muslims in China, for example, have been subjects of forced labor by the Chinese government in search of increased profits and re-educations. How has this problem been alleviated? Through the support of organizations like United Way. In the case of both Vinook Prum and Sabine, an organization dedicated to aiding victims of human trafficking was reached, leading to their respective rehabilitation. While organizations can assist in recovery after being subjects of human trafficking, it is more difficult for individuals to find a role in that stage of the battle. However, there are key parts that individuals do have to play in combating human trafficking, parts we will learn about later. Until then, Rin will help us clearly identify the underlying moral harms of human trafficking to better grasp the gravity of the crime.
Thank you, Devin. Every member of the human race has a right to freedom. Without it, society begins to crumble. According to Amy Adams in an article published on the Stanford News page in October 2015, quote, "All of us are wired to seek rewards and avoid losses. And that remains true in people with mental health disorders. But in those people, the nature of the risks and rewards and the way they achieve and activate that, the brain is skewed. We all know what a slave is, a person who is the property of another. This is in and of itself a decrease in freedom. Slaves are subject to all of their master's wishes, and if they do not obey, the master is free to punish the slave as they see fit. This can be anything from extra chores, entertaining their master's more carnal desires, severe beatings, or even death. In some places, the master has complete and utter control over the slave, and there isn't really anything anyone can legally do to stop them. This causes fear in the slave or slaves because the master can do whatever they wish with them, and the slave is helpless to stop them. They cannot get out unless given freedom by someone else. They work because they have no choice but to submit, one way or the other. As a result of this, these victims stand in a constant state of fear. According to an article published by Northwestern Medicine in October of 2020, quote, "Fear is experienced in your mind, but it triggers a strong physical reaction in your body. As soon as you recognize fear, your amygdala, or the small organ in the middle of your brain, goes to work. It alerts your nervous system, which sets your body's fear response into motion. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline are released. As some parts of your brain are revving up, others are shutting down. When the amygdala senses fear, the cerebral cortex, or the area of your brain that harnesses reasoning and judgment, becomes impaired. So now it's difficult to make good decisions or think clearly. As I stated previously, those in slavery are usually in constant fear. This fear causes a loss of clear thinking. If the slave cannot think, they are probably going to have a much harder time thinking of a potential escape plan, or that anyone even cares for them. The fear causes them to submit even more because they believe they have nothing left to lose. Not everyone is lucky enough to have an ending like Sabine or Prum. They are in the minority. Mental disorders are caused by a multitude of things, one of which is the individual's situation. Depending on the severity of the mental disorder, some people cannot make decisions on their own because they literally cannot think about it enough to make a good decision. This means they are depending on the people around them to make good decisions and choices for them in their place. These people have a decrease in freedom because they cannot make their own decisions. These people are mentally incapacitated, but they're not the only ones. These victims of human trafficking are experiencing other serious mental issues. This leads to another issue that will be discussed by Dalton: objectification.
Thank you, Rin. Many of my colleagues today have been using bits and pieces of mental psychology and objectification, which I'll be talking about today. And right now, I want to examine other negative effects and moral ills at the root of human trafficking. Currently, in modern psychology, we are discovering new ways to think about mental illness, physical and emotional stress, and the effects that are inherent or obtained through modern psychological processes. I want to explore this tragedy, illness, a bit more. When a human is subject to destructive or negative effects by other humans' decisions, in this case, human sex trafficking or labor trafficking, it is inflicting stress or interpreted in the cognitive psychological world as cortisol. In the brain, cortisol is related to stress and begins the fight or flight response to a situation to protect oneself. In this setting, the victim. Cortisol hormone, your body uses it as a primary response to dangerous or overwhelming situations. Healthline explains, quote, exposure to cortisol to long-term and other stress hormones can wreak havoc on almost all of your body's processes. increasing your risk for many health issues, from heart disease and obesity to anxiety and even depression, end quote. In summary, long exposure to cortisol is enacted as mental torture. This creates unhealthy human bodies, inevitably, the victim experiences many long-lasting negative effects, such as isolation, low self-esteem, PTSD, guilt and trust issues, and drug and alcohol abuses for coping mechanisms. Let's focus a minute on these effects. In many instances of human trafficking, victims are subject to isolation. Through the predator-victim cycle, the victim is in a continuous pattern of use and discard. During these torturous reflections and unreasonable thinking moments, many experience high cortisol levels and as discussed before, resulting in anxiety and depression of the guilt and shameful feelings for this situation they believe to be their fault. After use of the victim is complete, many get re-trafficked to another owner and subject to more abuse. According to sexual exploitation, low self-esteem, quote, low self-esteem being trafficked continuously can have major effects on one's self-esteem. They may feel unworthy of living and not good enough, close quote. Reinforcing that the feeling of guilt for the situation. During these trafficking situations, victims are subject to many abuses and psychological abuses, and is not uncommon as we see in Lily's speech. After victims are abused by whipping, hitting, or other shameful acts of frustration, of anger, and it results in, yes, more unhealthy cortisol levels and PTSD. PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, is developed from consistent cortisol and other cocktail of chemicals surging through the body and creating uncomfortable, scared, or otherwise known flight or fight emotions and memories. Many things from memory can enact a PTSD moment where a victim can become violent or break down in fear in a situation. After so many catastrophic events in one's life, many of these symptoms are prevalent and expected. Many victims experience a horrible life of drug and alcohol abuse to subsist the emotions and painful memories. Psychiatry advisor explains some statistics saying, quote, of the trafficked people, 51 were trafficked for sexual exploitation. 39% of adults and 27% of children in the trafficked group were diagnosed with PTSD. The researchers reported in the Lancet Psychiatry, depression was found in 34% of adults and 27% of children, and 15% of patients were diagnosed with schizophrenia, unquote. Work, school, or plain life becomes unbearable to an extent of unfunctionability. But what can we do about it? And how can we recognize the people being affected? My colleague, Caroline, is going to explain. Thank you.
Thank you, Dalton. As responsible citizens, it's our duty to make sure our community, cities, states, as well as our country are all safe. At the beginning, our colleague Esther exposed a very large criminal business that is occurring in our present day, human trafficking, the biggest international growing crime network. Now, this very large and dangerous enterprise has survived for hundreds of years, and shockingly, the percentages of trafficking are exponentially higher than ever. But we at the Wasatch Independent Civic Advocacy Group would like to be the start of putting an end to human trafficking. Now, nothing good comes without effort. So before I present my expositions of possible solutions to decrease human trafficking, I want you to think about the fact that this presentation we have worked so hard to bring today doesn't leave further than this room unless we all take an effort to reduce human trafficking. Now, with that in mind, the first thing we need to understand is who is trafficked. Thankfully, Lily discussed that earlier by stating many people who lack financial stability are likely to become victims.
However, human trafficking does include a vast demographic of victims: men and women, adults and children, educated and uneducated, people, foreigners, natives, undocumented and documented immigrants, as well as anybody else. Anyone is capable of becoming a victim. Now, the next important thing to know is how human traffickers operate. Now, what human traffickers look for are, or what they look for. Now, one of the things they look for is they search for people who show vulnerabilities that will allow them to control future victims. The most common vulnerabilities include runaways, dependency on drugs, homelessness, as well as undocumented status. Now we'll dive into something where we discuss where human traffickers operate, who they are, and why they flourish. Now, most human traffickers operate on telephone chat lines or in chat rooms, as well as in clubs, on the streets, in homes, on social media, and at the shopping malls, as well as on dates in high schools and during after-program awards. Now, who they are, if you'll see, is men and women of all ages, family members and friends, people of any ethnicity, and people of any financial background, as well as small businesses and decentralized criminal networks and international organizations. Now, the next section of import is why human trafficking flourishes and exists. We came up with a number of reasons as to why trafficking grows, and a brief description for each one of them. The first one is greed. You see, human traffickers make millions of dollars in this industry because human trafficking is the second largest business in the world. The second one is power. Human traffickers enjoy having a sense of power over the authority and over their victims. And the third is control. Similar to having power, human traffickers are able to control the lives of their victims through verbal and physical abuse. The fourth is lust. Human trafficking is driven by the desires of consumers, and usually the victims are used. The fifth is demand. The market of human trafficking is guided by the desire for cheap labor as well as for sex. The fifth is invisibility. Many victims of human trafficking are invisible to the world, meaning that their disappearance will not be noticed by the general public. The sixth is availability. Especially in the United States, infrastructure such as highways make it easier to transport victims across country borders. Now, it's important to be informed as to know why and how human traffickers operate so we can act in the necessary ways to protect the innocent. The biggest way to stop these consumer habits is by identifying where it happens and to stop supporting either the individual, the company, or the sport. Here are some places where human trafficking has proven and is known to happen. The first one is orphanages. As history tells us, many orphanages have been involved with human trafficking, as well as religious calamities and big sporting events where crowds and the noises allow it for easy human trafficking to take place. But thankfully, there are some businesses who have openly reached out about putting an end to trafficking. Here are a few of them. SAS has published an article about how crime-fighting and investigative agencies can fight human trafficking. Marriott has especially assured us that with the worldwide hold chain, they will help us in fighting and combating human trafficking. Cisco has posted their statement on human trafficking and is making efforts to ensure that no human trafficking activities take place within their company. And the last is Microsoft, who has openly talked about their fight to end human trafficking. Now, in our fight to end human trafficking, it is helpful and comforting to know we have the backing of these businesses. Without their support, even decreasement in the percentages would be nearly impossible. Now, we've all been there, driving past someone or something that has made us want to look away. It's hard, especially with the thought of knowing of what to do in our heads. But now that we know how it happens, where it happens, and a step in the right direction, the only thing left is to take some courage and take the step. It's true. Human trafficking is the scariest and largest business up to date. And the more we discover, the smaller we feel when fighting against it. But like I said, nothing comes without effort. So let's do what we must to stop human trafficking. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys so much for coming to our presentation. It really means a lot to us. We just wanted to let you know that at 6 o'clock Mountain Daylight Time, we're going to be presenting again on women in education. That'll be on the Wasatch Independent Debate League YouTube channel, and we hope to see everyone there. Thank you guys so much.